You are welcome to this important public hearing of a bill for an act to repeal the Public Enterprises, that is Privatization and Commercialization Act, 1999 Act, Cap P 38, Laws of Federation of Nigeria, 2004, and enact the Public Asset Reform Bill 2021 for improved efficiency and management of public assets in Nigeria and for the related matters. We are very happy with this turnout. First of all, I want to appreciate the cooperation and support of Mr. Speaker and the entire members of the Ninth Assembly in effort to repeal BPE Act and enact the Public Asset Bill 2021, as it is already passed the first and second readings respectively. Secondly, I would like to urge each and everyone here today to know that the purpose of this bill is to provide the right legal framework for efficient delivery of public-private partnership infrastructure projects to bridge the national deficit estimated at $1.3 trillion. In the approved National Integrated Infrastructure Plan for the federal government. This bill, ladies and gentlemen, when passed and assented by Mr. President, it will provide a clear roadmap for PPP in Nigeria via National Council of Public Assets and expand the scope and mode of privatization and commercialization to include specifically privatization, commercialization, private-public partnerships, concessions, public offers, and others. In other words, the ministries, department, and agencies, that's the MDAs, will have the opportunity to use the new law efficiently through BPE to execute PPP infrastructure contracts with ease and speed. The Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, that is the ICRC, will work hand in hand with the BPE as a regulatory agency of federal government for all PPPs by ensuring the full compliance with the national policy and public-private partnership, and that there is value for money for each project. This, Mr. Speaker, and our invited guest, is my understanding and purpose of this bill. We know that other countries have used and are using PPPs to deliver key infrastructure like roads, ports, railways, airports, etc., without adding burdens on their national treasury. We want to do the same, but more efficiently. That is why we're here today in this public hearing to get your inputs into the bill, so that if enacted, the nation will benefit from inflow of private funds, investments, and development of badly needed infrastructure. On this note, I would like to invite the leader who is representing Mr. Speaker to come and declare this public hearing open. Thank you.
Before going ahead to the speech, I would like to, by his mandate, convey his apologies for not being here personally. I believe you can all agree with me with the nature of engagements of the number 4 citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I believe wherever the Speaker may be now, his spirit is quite here, because I believe he has taken this matter under discussion as a very serious matter, and he has taken it with a lot of passion. I convey his apologies for not being here personally, and I will move ahead to read the speech as follows. Brief. A statement by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Rep. Femi Bajabiamila, at the public hearing on a bill for an act to repeal the Public Enterprises Privatization and Commercialization 1999 Act, Cap P38 Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, and enact the Public Asset Reform Bill 2021 for improved efficiency and management of public assets in Nigeria and for related matters, HB 1470. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the House of Representatives. I thank you all for taking the time to be here to participate in this effort by the House of Representatives to give thorough consideration to all that proposes to make significant changes to the way we manage public assets in our country. At a time when our country is struggling with significant revenue challenges, it is of utmost importance for us to think critically and act decisively to ensure that we have in place a legal framework for privatization and public-private partnerships that allow us to collaborate with the private sector to meet our national public infrastructure demands, and at the same time make sure that we maximize the value potential of existing assets. The Chairman, honorable members, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Committee on Privatization and Commercialization have worked hard to advance this bill through our legislative process, and I commend them for their very commitment to the delivery of this very important amendment bill. Now, the stakeholders here present have the opportunity and the obligation to work with the committee members to actualize the noble aspirations and underpin these legislative proposals. And I am therefore confident that your joint efforts will yield positive outcomes. On this note, therefore, honorable colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I stand on behalf of the Right Honorable Speaker, Honorable Femi Bajabiamila, and have the singular privilege to declare this public hearing open to the glory of God. I thank you all most sincerely for your efforts and wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, let me take a little time off after the presentation of the Speaker's speech. I think I have a moral responsibility and a duty to honestly and very candid enough say that on behalf of the leadership of the House of Representatives that is led by Right Honorable Femi Bajabiamila, that I appreciate and commend the kind of turnout I have witnessed or I have seen in this public hearing. I have to say so because we have witnessed in the past so many cases where you invite honorable ministers or head of agencies of government. Sometimes they don't turn out, or they send lower officials of government to come and engage with the people of Nigeria. Whoever is coming or invited to come to the National Assembly is not coming to engage with Ado Dogwa as an individual or person. And no one of you or any one of them out there is invited here to engage Makama Ibrahim from Misau. Every good Samaritan of this country, especially those of you in public service, and those of you who are specially appointed by the government through a democratic process that we all labored for, must have to have respect for this institution. Situations where we have had in the past ministers, agencies of government invited to come and engage with the parliament and they turn us down is quite unfortunate, and we will never let that thing continue henceforth. I know the nature of commitment, and I know the nature and schedules of the ministry Fashola is heading, Ministry of Works, which is of course the backbone and the key ministry that is delivering the programs and policies of the Buhari administration. I wouldn't be surprised if Fashola will have to attend to several sites in the country, perhaps 3 or 4 times in a day. But still, you have Fashola seated here, respecting the institution of the legislature. I have no business to commend him if he had done otherwise. Not only Fashola, the permanent secretary is seated, Babangida is there. And I believe so many other officials, senior officials of that ministry are here for this very big business that is intended and aimed to improve the lives and livelihood of our people. When we have laws to make, the assumption is that we are not as perfect as maybe others think. No member of the House of Representatives, even the Speaker, assumes monopoly of knowledge. We don't assume that I was elected 7 times from my constituency right from 1992 because I'm the most intelligent person in Tudunwadaodugu constituency. No. It was just the will of God, perhaps coincidental. So the idea is that we would like to engage members of the public, engage officials of government, so that we can quietly, through legislative process, tap and benefit from your respective intelligence and experiences. So that at the end, when we are coming up with legislation and laws, we come with the finest set of laws that will benefit our people, and laws that can even compete with other legislation outside Nigeria. So coming to engage with members of the House of Reps or Senate in the National Assembly is a national service. It is a national service, and everyone must have cause to respect that. Look at the President of the Nigeria, what do you call, am I right? Labour Union. Labour Congress. Look at him seated. They all came even before the representative of the Speaker came. And I also have to apologize. I had to rush from Kano to catch up with the first flight, get to Abuja here, and from the airport straight to this place to be able to deliver on the mandate and the directive of my principal, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I'm glad I met everyone, virtually everyone that was invited to come up for this program or for this public hearing is here seated, respecting the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I can believe you that the National Assembly, the national anthem we have just sung, that may the labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain. It is out of reality, and it is deep in your mind. It's not just for singing sake. And I therefore urge every other minister out there, every other head of a government agency out there, to emulate what I'm seeing through this public hearing engagement, because whoever does not do that is not a disrespect to our own persons respectively. It is a disrespect to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the institution of Nigeria's legislature, which is in this case the National Assembly. Let me once again apologize that I've come a little late. I had to come from Kano, first flight, from Abuja airport, a lot of traffic. I took a lot of time before I came here. I apologize for coming late by 15 minutes. And like I've told Fashola, when I was in Kano, as someone with 4 wives, you know, I have to do ward round, like a medical doctor. I had to do ward round to make sure everything is in order before I left my 4 wives in Kano. I thank you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Since last week, Wednesday, we have been in Lagos because of the National Council on Housing and Lands, which held in Lagos. So most of us returned back over the weekend. But if you don't mind me proceeding, I think there are some copies, if there are any extra copies that we can muster. Our intervention is short, trust me. So it's something that we can send back if you do not mind.
It's okay, you can go ahead.
So I was thanking the committee for inviting us, and also for the courtesies you have afforded our ministry. And let me also thank the chairman, the representative of the Honorable Speaker, Honorable Adodogowa in absentia, for all his very kind and generous words. But the truth is that perhaps it is possible that you underestimate the profundity of the journey that you are embarking upon. It's a very profound journey for Nigeria. It's very, very serious work that you have chosen to undertake to review the principal legislation, or one of it, that underpins privatization of public assets, and that perhaps explains the turnout that you have here. And you will see some of the interventions I propose to make as quickly as I can, why this is so. We have submitted, well, we have prepared, let me take that back now, we have prepared just a 2-page intervention, and they relate to Part 1, Part 3, and Part 4 of the draft legislation sent to us. So we're suggesting that in Section 6, subsection 3, where it is provided that not less than 1% of shares to be offered for sale to Nigerians shall be reserved for the staff of the public assets to be privatized, and the shares shall be held in trust. Our suggestion is that the percentage of reserved shares for staff should be a ceiling on the maximum number of shares. In other words, instead of saying not less than 1%, you may wish to consider and say not more than X percent should be made available to the staff. That's a suggestion we think we should make before you. Well, perhaps in the context of privatization, for example, it's always very difficult to deal in percentages, because percentages, 1% of a billion has a different impact as against 5% of a million. So perhaps you may want to take much more expert advice on that matter if you are proposed to move the way we suggest. But I think that's above my pay grade here to and perhaps DGBP and ICRC they do the bolts and nuts of these things on a much more recurrent basis. They may be able to offer advice, or the president of the labor union. I will go quickly to the second intervention, which is in Section 21, subsection 1B. And it deals with the appointment of the DG and other staff, which provides that the person to be appointed as DG shall not be below the rank of a permanent secretary in the civil service. It is our view that this in itself suggests possibly that the appointer may be looking around that area, and whereas we think that your intention is to ensure that the most competent persons from wherever they can be found would be brought in to head the agency, and therefore what would be the parallel of the rank of the permanent secretary perhaps in the private sector, if that is where the person should come from. So maybe you may want to open that recruitment criterion much more wider to, I beg your pardon? Well, private sector. Possibly, perhaps my views would be that if we seek to appoint a person, what I would always try to do is to first ask, what is the nature of the job? If we define the job that the person is supposed to do properly, it is easy to then identify the skill sets that are necessary to do it. And then we know the type of people we are actually looking for. And that may help in defining the eligibility criteria. So if we're looking, for example, for a goalkeeper, we shouldn't perhaps be looking for people who score. It's people who prevent goals from getting in, if you like that analogy. But I think the point is well taken. Then section 17 proposes for the functions of the Bureau, provides for the functions of the Bureau, and we're recommending that those functions should include the organization of training and development for PPP skills for desk officers and also for the management of career progression and so on and so forth. Section 18 of the bill, which provides for the functions of the Bureau on the concession of public assets, in our view, appears to conflict with the provisions of the ICRC Act. It is therefore our suggestion, if you agree, as we think that there is a conflict, that this section should be amended and brought in consonance with the ICRC Act, or in the alternative, it should be deleted. And I'd made a side note to speak about the seeming crosshairs between the BPE and the ICRC. So I better just close on that point so that I won't come back to it. We've received recent circulars from, I think, the Secretary to the Government Federation's office about who is responsible for concession, who is not responsible for concession, and we were undertaking a project called the Highway Development Management Initiative, HDMI, in which we offered the public to take up concession of 12 highways, including the provision and advertisement, tolling services, towing vehicles, ambulance services, restways, rest places, and all of those facilities on the highway. And we had worked with ICRC all the way until somehow BP came and said we had left them behind, and that in fact they came with the authority of a circular saying that, and I said, well, the more the merrier. But look, point be made, what does that add to bureaucracy and process? And so that as we go forward with this, we don't leave the public in any doubt as to where authorities start and end and where responsibilities become clearly defined, because we can't have two agencies of the same government muscling for the same territorial space. So this is something you want to look at in more detail, if you will. Then section 29 of the bill, which deals with the restriction on execution against the property of the Bureau, provides that the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation shall be responsible for paying the judgment sums awarded against the Bureau. We have referred to section 174, which deals with the mandate of the Attorney General under the Constitution, and it is our respectful view that this mandate does not include the payment of settlement or judgment debts, and that this should be the responsibility of each agency or institution that becomes a judgment debtor. And of course, you know where that advice is strongly coming from. It's coming from the Director of Legal, who is a staff of the Office of the Attorney General in our ministry. So But it is well-informed advice, which I feel confident to recommend to you, sir. Then, Part 5, Section 31. We just think that the qualification for the appointment of members to the Public Assets Arbitration Panel should be specified, and the process for nominating them as well. And we think that it is not right for the chairman of the council, who is or may be a party to the arbitration proceedings before the panel, to also be a member of the same panel. So we think that those are things that we will. So we say that Section 31, which provides for Public Assets Arbitration Panel, does not provide for the requisite qualification for the appointment of the members, and does not seem to specify how they will be nominated or appointed. That's the first thing. The other point we then make is that it appears that the chairman of the council, who is a party in an arbitration, right, before the arbitration panel, seems to have been listed as a member of the same panel. So it's something about natural justice. Can you sit in a panel representing an institution that is also a party to the proceedings? We think you should just take a look at that. Now, that is the official side of our work. I have spent some time in the last 2.5 years trying to put up a position which I have not finished. And I've been discussing with the members of the Senate about it, because it came up, as I said, when we were trying to concession the roads. And I just thought that I should share my thoughts with you, if you permit, maybe for another 10 minutes. And just to say that very, very upfront, I am not against private sector investment or participation in national development. I am not against it. So let me make my position very, very clear. But it seems that a conversation has persisted suggesting that every time we have a developmental problem, the silver bullet is give it to the private sector, PPP. It seems to be, and I think that is a conversation that has been had in very general terms, and it needs to be interrogated in very granular form, in some detail. And I just wish to point this honorable committee in that direction. And the first thing I want to first ask is, of all the assets that we have disposed and the reasons for disposing them, or for commercializing them, or for privatizing them, have we achieved the objective that we set out to achieve?
Candidly, honestly,
I think we should ask that question. And I think, apart from making this law, that undertaking will be a profound service to Nigeria, so that all of us will have a very, very, very clear understanding of the capacity, the ability, and what is realistic to expect of the private sector. Indeed, in our last retreat, this subject came up, and I alluded to it, that where is the private sector? I came from there, the vice president came from there, the president came from there, many of us, he came from there. So we're all here now. So who are we handing it back to? In a manner of asking. But I think that it would be helpful to have an audit of all the assets that have been concessioned and privatized in the name of improved efficiency, and then to ask, have we achieved that objective? I think if we do that and interrogate very honestly, some of the things that will begin to become obvious to us is that we need to be more circumspect about certain types of assets. And this is the important point. There are certain types of assets that the private sector just is unable to deal with. For example, when you look at roads, not many people who claim to want to do it have the capacity or the experience to do it. And let us start with the Lekki Expressway, which was concessioned. The concession agreement, members of this committee might want to know, concession agreement was signed in 2005. I was chief of staff then. They did not reach financial close until 2010. That was 5 years. So between 2007, when I became governor, and 2010, the road had to start. So for an asset we had concessioned, the Lagos state government had to first go and borrow money to start the work, lend to the concession. So, and in terms of political arrangements, you never have 5 years, you have 4 years. And within the first 3, if you are not showing results, you are going to meet the electorate. So these are some of the real challenges when we have these expectations. Off the top of my head, I remember then that concession discussion meetings used to involve almost 50 people, different lawyers, different experts representing different groups. And the concession agreement we signed was almost 1,000 pages. And there were like 9.
Honourable Minister, just let me, you are a bit fast for me. You concession the road. You became a governor. You made the agreement. The private sector couldn't execute the job.
They couldn't raise the money.
Fine. The state government had to go out to borrow the money and give it to the private sector.
Because the public didn't care what, they just wanted the road.
Honourable Minister, was that the right thing to be done?
In the circumstances you have signed an agreement, you can't cancel the agreement. It affects the business and credit rating of the state and the country. That you don't keep agreements, that's a statement to investors. This is the reality.
Now you are the Minister of Works. What are you doing about that road? About that concession?
It's not under my management anymore. It's a Lagos State responsibility. Now let me share with you. Let me share with you so that you see, that's why I said we should have this conversation. One of the conditions in that agreement was that tolls were not only going to be charged, which was fine, was that tolls will be indexed against exchange rate, they will be indexed against inflation and interest rate. And it's not likely to be significantly different when it comes in. The other point, and when I use roads as an example, is that the roads themselves are long tenured assets, 30, 35-year roads. Another example of where we will have difficulty and where nations, not just us, have difficulty is rail, the track. Those are 100-year assets. So there is no 100-year money in the market. So usually, government builds those assets, roads, rail. Then you can concession maybe the rolling stock, the wagons. you can concession the advertising. That's where business is, that's where business wants to be. Airports, the terminal building, wonderful for privatization, but not the runway or the control tower. Because in the terminal building, there's quick money moving around, people selling, rent, shops. So all I'm speaking to is that we should have a clear understanding of the type of assets that are easily amenable to PPPs. Not all assets are easily amenable. That's the point I just want us to make. So it's not a silver bullet to every infrastructure problem. So I'll quickly move. Then we can't do PPPs and discuss PPPs in isolation of our economy, whether at the national, state, regional, or global. So the first question to ask is, at the time, so let's take a highway that we offered for PPP, 2 highways actually. The second Niger Bridge was conceived as a PPP. The Lagos-Ibadan Expressway was conceived as a PPP. But if we had asked very basic questions at the time, 200 billion plus projects, which bank in Nigeria has ever lent 200 billion naira to any individual? If we had asked those questions, we would know that it was not the way to go. They might have lent it, but inevitably, it was more likely that they would have come back for a sovereign guarantee. If you are guaranteeing something, you might as well do it yourself. So in the end, what happened between 2006, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the 2010, the second Niger Bridge, nothing significantly happened on those projects until 2016. So we lost like 10 years before this administration now started funding directly. Again, as I said, I have nothing against PPPs. There are just some things that there are classes of assets, there are social assets, and that is the responsibility of government. Then the third point I would like to bear in mind, as I said, look at the economy. So what's the Nigerian economy like? So Nigerian economy, roughly plus or minus, a substantial part of it is MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises. The micro employs about 1 to 5 people or something like that. The medium and all of that. So how many of them turn over 1 billion naira? Turnover. So let's say turnover 1 billion, let's even raise the ROI 20%, 200 million. Tax after that, profit, ROI, 200 million, that's your profit. 33% you pay corporate tax. What's left? Is that the money that will be used to build a road or a bridge? Yes, so let's go to the foreign investments. That's why I said local, regional, and global. In the last 15 years, which countries are providing development funding? It was only China, and China is now pulling back. All the other economies, America is sitting on 23 trillion naira, $23 trillion debt.
Sorry, Honorable Minister, we have a lot to take.
So,
so can you summarize?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to quickly now add a few these things, that we are not in a bad place in terms of PPP if we really look in what the studies that I have done. We will see that other jurisdictions, India, the totality of its assets, 67% of it is being funded by government. 67, as against 33, which is private. In South Africa, it is 94 public, 6 private. 94% public, public funding, 6 private. In Malaysia, it is 67 public, 33 private. And in the UK, it is 84 public, 16 private. Now, in Nigeria, from the figures we have done, we seem to be almost at about 50-50 if you look at our public works budget. Because if you look at the PIDF, if you look at the Sukuk, if you look at the road infrastructure tax credit scheme, we just injected, I think, 320 billion this year as a ratio of public expenditure to what is in the budget, which was about 300 billion alone. You will see that we're almost even at par. And therefore, there is some significant injection of private capital, but they are going into this thing. Finally, as I said, we should ask those questions. And this is no indictment of the private sector or anybody. Look at an organization like the port, Tinkan and Apapa Port. Perhaps members of the public may not be aware or conscious of it. They are being run by private companies. I was governor when President Yar'Adua handed over the concession, which had been completed before he came into office. But that's where we have congestion. Where are the issues of congestions, really? Inspection of containers, for example. So government is the one that is recently buying scanners. Otherwise, you have to physically open a container. So 16 or 15, how many years, 2006 to now? 15 years after that concession, why are there no scanners? So those are some of the things. Why has that's why I say if we did an audit and went to look back, it may help us. I've looked at the schedule of the list of privatized companies and assets, and some of them have literally disappeared from operation. Now is one of them, and a couple of others. So in some places, you've seen asset stripping.
Outright stripping.
So again, can we connect that to, so those companies, yes, they were running at heavy government costs, but there were people employed there. Can we connect this policy to the impact on employment or lack thereof? Is it possible? And finally, if we go and look at this, parliament passed a law, the AMCON legislation, to bail out about 300 or so people whose death constituted a danger to the financial sector, and it may have, spun on as a virus to other sectors of the economy. Essentially, it was government buying the debt. If we do the audit that I am urging, is there any one of those people who went to bail out who bought an asset? And have we inadvertently bought back the asset we supposedly sold? So there's a lot to take in, Mr. Chairman. I understand you are pressed for time, and I thank you very much for the indulgence, but those are things I think you should consider as you make this law.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
So we can have clarity. You asked a question, let me be very brief, about is there any company, any entity that is joint, is privatized, that is doing well, that has not disappeared? The answer is in affirmative, very little, less than 5% of them. And we noticed one thing therein, because I've been privileged to also be in this committee for the past 14, 15 years. You see, our drafting in preparing that agreement is always lopsided. That the investors will always leverage on the ill drafting and now will do what they think. You see, monitoring is also another thing. Do you not think that government cannot do everything. I also share a sentiment that government can go ahead. In fact, from your language, from your body, whatever, you said we should do PPP with a pinch of salt. We should be careful. Because I listened to your superlative comparison, UK, Malaysia, all whatnot. Why is Nigeria different? What is happening? You've been privileged to be at the center of governmental affairs. What are you recommending? Don't you think that we should preserve regulation and operation so we can define these things and put a stricter thing? Above all, can we make these persons independent? You talked about appointment of the general or whatnot. Is it independent? Why they are not independent? To look at things from nationalistic view and not political view. That's the problem, sir. Most things that we do privatize is based on sentiment and not on reality. I can also show you that, but for want of time, I pray we'll have another conversation with you. I pray you find time to come and dialogue with us so that we can. I love your sentiment. All the sentiment canvassed is in agreement. I'm in agreement with it. They are real. They are right. Why is it that Lagos also is working? Federal government cannot work. I'll tell you. You told us something about some other roads in Lagos that are also working. What is happening to us? When can we begin? We must tidy up. I've seen investors here now. Can we use the Indian model, for example? If we use their model, it will help us. Can we use the Chinese model? If we use it, it will help us. Why are we not? We are running for them to come to invest and we cannot use their own model. So the problem is with us, not necessarily in laws. The laws are also at times good. Implementation. So what do we do to tighten up? I also want to thank the legal department. For example, they said payment of judgment debts. Most judgment debts, as a lawyer and a senior, most judgment debts are even compromised, not canvassed, not pursued. Well, let me stop at this. Thank you.
My name is Mark Bula from Benue State. But I would like to get your take on the issue of an asset register from your vantage position of being privileged, of being the Minister of Power and Works and Housing. I'm sure you are very privy to this critical aspect of what we should be capturing to in this legislation. So I would like for you to please give us your own opinion in that regard. I think it will be invaluable to us as well. Thank you very much.
Is an undertaking, and it is also a responsibility of trust. And therefore, it would seem logical that if you have anything under management, you must be able to account for it. And therefore, the idea of an asset register for that purpose is not only commendable, it's sensible. You need to know what you are managing, what you own, and even what you propose to dispose of. To the first question, there are many things rolled in there. So let me say that, as I said earlier, I am not against privatization. I'm not against private sector. I'm only saying that they can't do everything. So in Lagos, for example, that you referred to, we had very successful partnership with the private sector in the area of security. We had a very, very reliable security trust fund. We had very successful partnership in the area of education. We had a policy called Adopt a School. But we realized that some people couldn't own a whole school. So we broke it into smaller bits, adopt a classroom, so that people were not being challenged or tasked to do what they could not afford to do, even if there was good intention there. So it was only a few people who could say, give me a school. And those are the nuanced suggestions that I'm making, that every time we have a problem with development, infrastructure, the PPP is not a silver bullet. It is one of the many bullets, if you like, that we should use. You speak very, very importantly about the regulation. One of the things that has happened in the Nigerian economy that we haven't focused enough on is that it is a largely private economy. From the days when government used to own banks, used to own telecoms, used to own airplanes, all of those undertakings now. So if your plane is delayed, it's often not government, it's the private sector. If you drop your call, it's not, if you are disconnected, you have dropped calls, it's not government, it's private service. I've spoken about the port. Power now, if you, the government role in power is just policy. All the assets have been sold except the transmission line in 2013. So when I took office as Minister for Power, there were 700 and something staff left in the ministry. That ministry used to have 50,000 staff. So they used to own all the generation, transmission, distribution. If you sold them, why are you keeping 50,000 staff? So it's a largely private economy. And this takes me to the point you made, sir, about regulation. The regulatory authorities, perhaps except for places like Central Bank, NCC, Consumer Protection, PENCOM, Standard, we need to raise the game. That's where the answer is. Once you have a private sector economy like this, then we need to focus on who the regulators are. They are the ones who carry the responsibility for ensuring that the right things are done. They are the ones who must not be caught with the people they regulate. No, those are the realities. And then we need to perhaps redefine what are the skill sets necessary to appoint a regulator. What should the regulator know? Because it's electricity or because it's highway construction, it may not necessarily be an engineer or electrician or whatever that you need, because regulatory work is actually a balancing of the interests of the consumer, the economy, and the law and economics and business continuity. So it may not necessarily be the skill to run that industry, but to regulate the industry that is really necessary.